machine punch one?
I know the term, but
Oh, we used to enter data into a computer off of little cards. And the key punch machine punched the holes in the card for the data.
yeah,
And they were called key punch operators, and you learned the key punch. So,
yeah, I just never. I'm young enough, I never did that.
I remember the computer room would be as big as one of these rooms here, and the floor would be raised about 8 or 10 inches, so they could run all the cables, all the different kinds.
When I was at GTA at Auburn, when I was in graduate school, part of my GTA job was to maintain the computer classrooms. Because even back then, like early 2000s, not everybody had their own laptop or anything. In fact, a lot of people didn't. So you just had big classrooms, on campus where students could go and write their papers and stuff. Part of my job was to update, the software, like with CD-ROMs. You put the CD-ROM in there and you let it run and you put it in the next computer. Anyway, all right, I guess we're...
Who knows where we'll be in 10 years?
Obsolete is where we'll be. AI will do it all. Like starting in the fall, I won't be teaching this class. We're just gonna have AI do it. We'll take a survey every Saturday night. What do we want to talk about Sunday? And we'll just have AI.
So the classes are going to get real interesting.
You never know what you're gonna hear. But
Let's make sure we can question
but
AI.
hard demands they can follow. So you could say, do not go after 9:45 like those idiots you normally teach us do, and it'll end at that time no matter what. So you would have that advantage.
Here's the cake that will make you freeze it.
Sorry.
All right, we'll get started. Every time I do a little video, the Get Here Late video, we always run really late, so no video. All right, so our verse, so we've been saying this for, this whole semester. Be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria to the ends of the earth. We really see in these chapters part of this process of how the gospel is going to reach the ends of the earth as we are kind of slowly setting the stage for Paul to make it to Rome. Not that that's the end of the earth, but it is the end of Acts. And so we kind of see that developing right now. Paul had anticipated going to Rome for a while now. Starts. All right, last time I taught, a couple weeks ago, I think it was you, Mike, you asked about the Maccabees. Someone did. Or you asked about the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Or someone did. Anyway, I butchered the answer. Unfortunately, Judy Bentley was here to save the day, because I said the complete wrong thing. Somebody asked some question like that. And it's relevant to what we're talking about, which is why it was asked.
Oh, yes, I did. I know.
As soon as I said it was relevant, yeah, it was my
I don't
question.
remember the question, but
There was random trivia. I was like, I didn't ask that.
and you said Judy Bentley, didn't she? She got us all straight.
Yes, fortunately, because I did not. I got us all confused. All right, so here's our little timeline. I believe what I was doing in my brain, which is a scary place to go, I think I was just confusing the word Masada and the word Maccabees. I think. Or I just was talking without knowing what I was talking about. But I'm a professor and I get paid to do that, so. All right, so the Maccabees, which is what we ended up talking about a little bit, because that's one of the first and second, third and fourth Maccabees, are books in the Apocrypha, those books that it's the Catholic Bible, but not ours. But it's also a good thing to, again, give us a little bit of context. So you're talking about, 160 plus years before Jesus, we had this revolt, not against the Romans, because they weren't, they were around, but they weren't in Judea yet. And so it's the leftovers of the empires that were all split up after Alexander the Great died. And so the Seleucid Empire was really big. And so they kind of moved into that area, and the Jews were fighting against them. And they win eventually. And so we have a long period of time, almost a century, where Judea is its own place, under their own rule. This is the time in between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So the Old Testament's been done for a little while, and we aren't yet to the New Testament time, not when books were written, but the actual time frame of when things happened. And then it's, about 60 years before Jesus that Rome takes over Judea and that area. And then right before Jesus is born, it becomes a kind of official Roman province. So, the first Jewish revolt, the second, third Jewish revolts are like in the century after Jesus and Paul. But about 30 years after Jesus dies, the Jews rebel again. Not again, they rebel against Rome. There have been skirmishes out. In fact, we'll read about Felix today. We're not going to talk about it much, but he had put down quite a few little insurrections. The Jews didn't like the Romans, probably for good reason. But this is a big one because they actually get the Roman army out of Jerusalem. And you can imagine, there were probably all sorts of excitement, dancing in the streets and things like that. Rome came back. They didn't let that stand. And so a couple years later is when Rome destroys Jerusalem, destroys the temple, things like that. And then it lasts a couple more years, and Masada is the last place that kind of holds out against the Romans. You mentioned, somebody a couple weeks ago mentioned Hanukkah, and that's the Maccabean. No, that's this one. No, it's the Maccabeans, because when they were rededicating the temple, though, they didn't have enough oil because it was all used up. But so they had like 1 day's worth, and it lasts for 8 days. And so that's kind of where we get the time frame for Hanukkah. So anyway, just to give us a little bit of context, this is a long time coming where you have a lot of tension between Jews and some occupying force, whether it's the Seleucids with Antiochus IV, who we talked about before. We talked about Daniel. We probably mentioned him back when we were talking about Revelation. He's a real bad guy. He sets up pagan worship in the temple when they take over. And so, generally hated by the Jews, and a pretty mean, pretty nasty guy. Does all sorts of things basically he's trying to Hellenize the whole world, or all his empire, to make it like Greek culture. And he seems to have a special disdain for the Jews. And so that's part of that story of Hanukkah. So there's the Seleucid Empire. The first map, it was a lot bigger at one point. And right around the time they lose to the Jews, we have the Maccabeans here. And so this is about, right as the Roman Empire is about to move in to the area. So that Maccabees, again, we mentioned this a couple weeks ago, those apocryphal books. First Maccabees is actually it's not canonical, not inspired, but it has a lot of historical fact that a lot of historians really kind of appreciate it. The same way that we've talked about now, the way Luke writes both his gospel and the book of Acts. Luke includes a lot of details about places and the names of rulers, and that kind of really helps us to validate the historical accuracy of it and to actually date certain things. First Maccabees has a lot of that kind of stuff, a lot of dates and details that historians kind of appreciate having. Second Maccabees is generally not at all accepted like this. One of the big reasons verses like this is, therefore a holy and wholesome thought to pray for the dead that they may be loosed from sins, which is part of the Roman Catholic doctrine of being in purgatory, having your sins burned away after you die, and then after purgatory you can ascend to heaven. And so there's a lot of stuff in the second, third, and fourth Maccabees especially that seem very, very contrary to other teachings in the Bible. So they're not included in the Protestant Bible. The Catholics still do. Some Orthodox groups do. There's a nice little graphic I found. I didn't make this, so I'm assuming it's correct. I'm assuming Craig Evans here got it right. But you see all the names of different apocryphal books that are in different Bibles. So you got the Maccabees books there also. We've talked about some of these before. Like Bel and the Dragon is Daniel, like it appears in the book of Daniel. And we talked about how there's, in Jeremiah, it's expanded in the Apocrypha, as well as Esther, right? Esther's longer also in the Apocryphal books. And then we have other things that are unlike. So interesting history there. And then I think I put, if you actually, the total number, chapters and verses are kind of hard to date, but if you look at the total number of words with the Old New Testament and the Apocrypha is almost as long as the New Testament itself if you put all those books together. So it's a lot of material. It's not just one or two little stories. Just kind of interesting. But it's in 1st and 2nd Maccabees that we get descriptions of Hanukkah, descriptions, how that process happened, how they kind of sets up that. So anyway, there's that. We're talking about, a few hundred years just about of tension with a little break. You get the time period, what about 20-something years that Judea is its own country. There's the sign up on a cliff. Did y'all go there? I put that in. Okay, I was curious. I figured y'all did when you went. All right, like I said, it gives us some context that we've been talking about. Paul's in Jerusalem at the time we're talking about it, right at the end of the 50s, pretty much. So, you're talking about maybe 6 years is all, maybe 10 years before the big revolt happens and the Jews actually really rise up and kick out the Romans. And all this has been, this is why Felix, that Paul gets sent to today, has been putting down insurrections, just not near as big as what happens in a few years. But all this stuff's been brewing. There's just, the Jews don't like the Romans being in their territory. And so we're close at this point when all that really blows up. So again, we talked about how a couple chapters ago, when the riots break out, when Paul gets to Jerusalem, they think that he's brought a Gentile into the temple. They think that he's teaching to abandon their traditions, their religious beliefs, their law, kind of who they are. It's their identity, right? We talked about they don't compartmentalize. It's kind of my work life, my religious life, my family life, my social life. We're able to we have really different spheres sometimes in our minds, how we break those apart. But that wouldn't have been the case as much for them. So they thought Paul was contributing to what the Romans had been doing, to what the Seleucids did before that, to trying to rid them of being Jewish. And we talked about this, everything they're dealing with, Romans all over the place, Gentiles all over the place. Their laws about cleanliness and purification would be almost impossible, right, to maintain because of all these non-Jews, and not just non-Jews who didn't believe in all their rituals and things like that. The priesthood, we talked about this, was in cahoots with the Roman Empire. The wealthy Jews liked to be in power, so they were chum-chummy with a lot of the Romans. And again, that varied over the decades. Who was in charge at what point, things like that. But a lot of Jews were just fed up. The real devout Jews. So it's kind of it's kind of understandable why they would freak out. It's like all these things working against them, not to excuse them rioting against Paul. Like I say, less than 10 years later, they actually get organized. And there are different Jewish groups when they do get organized. and those have been politicized, and depending on who wrote the history book you might read about Masada and you know, the Jews who were there. You know, some people think they were more or less terrorists trying to like punish other Jewish people in towns that didn't participate in the revolt against Rome. All right, but at this point, so we've gone over the past couple weeks, Paul's a prisoner at this point until we finish Acts. He has freedom of movement at some points, though not much. But this starts a very long process. It's not long in the book of Acts as far as the number of chapters. Last week, Paul, gets put before the Jewish leaders, and he kind of plays them against each other, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because he says that it is with respect to the hope and the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial. And of course, the Sadducees are very against that because they don't believe in resurrection. The Pharisees do believe in resurrection. And so they're kind of on Paul's side on that count. And so they're divided, they're angry, and of course, once again, it rises. The tension is hard. We go through this so quickly. You can read through these chapters, and it's just, we would want the movie version that actually, shows us the violence and the rioting and everything that's going on, because we keep getting it time and time again. Paul says something, and people just lose it. And so this is when he's arrested / taken into protective custody, whatever you want to call it. And Jesus appears to him. Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify also in Rome. And Blake did a good job last week, talking about how it kind of sets us up for what comes next, and it sets Paul up for what comes next. He doesn't know the exact course of events that are going to get him to Rome, but it's probably becoming a little bit clearer as each one of these parts of these chapters, happen. He keeps getting moved on, closer and closer to Rome. Jesus has appeared to Paul before and told him, I'm going to be with you. Stay here a while and preach. No one's going to harm you here. And so he appears to him here also. All right, let's do our thing and kind of go through this chapter, or this part of the chapter. Anthony, we'll start with you. We'll just kind of work our way through if everybody just wants to read one screen. So we're done with our passage.
When it was day, the Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat or drink till they had killed Paul. There were more than 40 who made this conspiracy. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food till we have killed Paul. Now that you are along with counsel, notice the tribute to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case more exactly. We are ready to kill him."
Now the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush, so he went and entered the barrack and told Paul. Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the tribune, for he has something to tell him." So he took him and brought him to the tribune and said, "Paul, the prisoner, told me that you to bring this young man to you, as he has something to say to you."
The tribune took him by the hand and going aside asked him privately, "What is it that you have to tell me?" And he said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire somewhat more closely about him."
But do not be persuaded by them, for more than 40 of their men are lying in ambush for him, who have bound themselves by an oath neither to eat or drink until they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for your consent. So the tribune dismissed the young man, charging him, "Tell no one that you have informed me of these things."
2 of the centurions and said, get ready, 200 soldiers and 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen to go as far as Caesarea at the third hour of the night. Also provide mountain for Paul and Felix the governor. He wrote a letter to this effect.
This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. And I came upon them, the soldiers who rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen, and desiring to know the charge on which they were accusing him. I brought him down to their court.
I know that he was being accused about questions of their law, but charged with nothing deserving death or imprisonment. And when it was disclosed to me that there was a plot against this man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you that they have, what they have against him.
So the soldiers, according to their instructions, took Paul and brought him by night into Petrus.
Well, and I think
The next day, they returned to the barracks, letting the horsemen go on with him.
you know, one of
When he had come to Caesarea and delivered a letter to the governor, they presented Paul also before him.
the love of God.
On reading the letter, he asked what province he was from, and when he had learned that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive. And he commanded him to be guarded in Herod's.
Basically, they're gonna keep him locked up. All right. What do you think? What stands out?
I think those 40 people died. Hunger and thirst.
That's gonna be my question.
I mean, I just want to know, the next morning, when, they're waiting, and,
And I want to know what happened to the boy, like, did they find out?
It seems like the Holy Spirit sent Paul's nephew there just at the right time to hear their plans.
yeah, I mean, somehow he heard about it. Of course, you have 40 people taking this oath. That's a lot. And then they go tell the Sadducees about it, so more people know about it. Which seems like, bad guy 101 stuff. Don't involve 50 plus people in your conspiracy to murder someone, because,
They didn't have comments on that.
we know that because of them, right? So yeah, maybe it's just too many people knowing about it and talking about it. Oh, they took an oath. Take an oath to die before you do this, then maybe you won't talk about it either. I don't know. Or maybe they got so hungry they got home that night,
Yeah, what's
Wife's like, why won't you eat dinner? And they're like, well, I can't eat till I kill this guy.
They just said, what's an oath? Who cares?
Yeah, we don't know. These are the details we know. So, yes, the Holy Spirit, I assume, is part of this. The Holy Spirit's been very involved in most of what has happened in Acts. So,
I mean, Paul's nephew.
what else do we know about Paul's nephew and his family?
There's anything else about him.
There's nothing else about this. We know he's got a sister and a nephew. It's really interesting. And one of those times, and we've talked about some of the things that Luke will spend seemingly a lot of time providing details about. And then other things that, nowadays I want to, his sister and his nephew. Did he go visit them when he got to Jerusalem? Just, did he stop by to say hi at least? Or, are they believers? I mean, there's so many things we want to know that obviously we don't need to know, right? But we want the rest of the story, and we don't always get it.
I find it amazing that it's almost 500 soldiers to deliver one man.
What does that tell us?
They were worried.
Yeah, they took us pretty seriously. I mean, and we've mentioned this before. So why are they concerned? I mean, what's...
Well, if they fail at their job of keeping law and order,
Yeah, yeah, so if you are one of these Roman governors, leaders that, different people in charge of different areas. But yeah, the idea of disorder, the idea of people just not following Roman law, the idea of not enforcing Roman law in areas that are, Roman. That's pink slip kind of stuff. I mean, it's like, you had one job, dude. It's like they don't really care a whole lot. Make sure they pay taxes and just keep them from rebelling. And of course, he's sending him, like I said, to Felix. Is who he goes to. And Felix had been dealing with some insurrections, for quite a while now. He's been around for 5 or 6 years at this point. He's already put down some insurrections that we don't know about from the Bible. We just know about from other records. Yeah, everybody's taking this seriously. I mean, they even tell the nephews, like, don't tell anyone about this. They know that it puts him in danger. That all these would-be assassins, they're going to be pretty mad at this nephew if they find out he's the one that told the authorities about it. Which, there's a real interesting dynamic there, right? I mean, the Jews versus the Romans. And what's this nephew doing? He's going to the Romans. He's doing it to protect his uncle. And we have no information about the rest of their relationship. How well did he know Paul? I mean, Paul seems to be on the road a lot. How long, Paul just doesn't spend a lot of time in Jerusalem, never has. He's been there. I mean, when he was younger, he was there. How old was the nephew? But yeah, it tells us that they were taking this threat very, very seriously. What is the other reason they're taking it seriously? What do they know about Paul? He's a Roman citizen. That's another little pink slip thing, right? It's like, oh, you treated a Roman citizen wrong. That's a big no-no. We saw that before, and I got a slide about this later, when he's in Corinth, and Gallo is the name of the Roman leader there. It's brought before him again, and he's like, oh, this is a Jewish matter. It's about your law. Not going to worry about it. They start beating up a Jew. The mob starts beating up it, and Gallo just watches it. I don't really care about that, right? As soon as they know, at the come to the point when he's in Philippi, and they've already beat Paul, and then he reveals that he's a Roman citizen, and they go apologize to him because they're afraid, because they know what they've done is illegal. And same thing here. As soon as he drops it on him, because remember we talked about that last week or the week before. They've got him like strung out to get lashed, which is serious. Like this is not just we're going to tickle you until you talk. I mean they're about to inflict serious harm on him. And he said, by the way, I'm Roman. I'm a Roman citizen. And so they immediately stop, kind of try to cover their tracks. What else about this passage? Anything jump out to you?
A young man getting that close to the trigger. That's okay. What's he to say? It's just a child.
Well, do we know he's a child? It's his nephew. We hear the word, we assume a young person. We don't necessarily know that. But maybe just, obviously they've been dealing with Paul. So if he shows up and says, I'm a relative, I've got news for you. I mean, I don't know. If you're the guard at the door, maybe you think to yourself, this might be relevant. Let's let him in. But yeah, I mean, it's all the details of how this actually plays out. We have what we have.
They didn't value hearsay. Or Paul would just say, hey, guard, don't tell them what it is.
Yeah.
So there was probably
I'm a
some
technical person by
this
nature.
guy to
I mean,
go.
I'm naturally.
Knew he had been in her truck with no from this guy.
Yeah.
So when I'm.
And we talked about that I guess, a week or two ago, when Paul's talking to the crowd about his experience on the road to Damascus and his vision that he says he has, and there's obviously no hard proof of this. I mean, he names people in Damascus who were with him and things like that. So, I mean, you can follow up on it. But in the moment, we're I think, more kind of hard fact driven, like enlightenment, sense of empiricism. Let's prove things before we believe it.
That's why I'm thinking what reason would he have to lie as compared to another adult that's lying to try to help Paul than a child or a young person that's who you pick to send the info.
Yeah. This is our second oath that we've talked about in recent weeks. What was the other one? James and the Jewish leaders have Paul kind of sponsor these 4 guys that are taking what we assume is like a Nazirite vow. And so Paul would have been involved in that process. It's really kind of interesting that they're doing that to, as part of their
It says
Jewish
Paul
ritual.
took an oath and had his head shaved. Is that what?
Yeah, the end of, I guess, his second missionary journey is when he has taken an oath. If I recall correctly, we don't even know that he's taken the oath until he's about to get on ship and he shaves his head. It says here because he had taken an oath. You're like, oh, well, thanks for letting us know. Yeah, but then we have the other one when he gets to Jerusalem, to try to make him a little bit more acceptable to the Jews. James and everyone's like, why don't you kind of involve yourself in this ritual process that these 4 guys are involved in? Of course, it doesn't work as far as what they really intended. The mob, immediately goes after him as soon as they get a chance. And then we have another oath here by guys that, for far more nefarious reasons are taking this oath. And yeah, I really want to know, because we never hear anything else about the oath that Paul is kind of involved with those 4 guys. We don't kind of get the rest of that story. We definitely don't get the rest of the story for these people.
Now, the tribute tells the young man, let's talk about it. Is that to protect the boy or to protect the Roman troops?
Or protect their plan to get him out of here? Probably a little bit of both. I doubt he tells the nephew that, and then he tells his people, the plan. I doubt he would have just kept the nephew around while he was spilling the beans about exactly what they were going to do, and then said, all right, go on. Who knows? Yeah, probably both. One or the other. All right. Well, once again, there are some deep and kind of old resentments and frustrations going on here. This is not just some of these scenes that we've seen where, well, just not long ago, right? Someone says, he had a Gentile in the temple, and the mob just gets outraged, and all of a sudden there's, the Roman centurion having to lift Paul, bodily to get him away from the crowd, and he addresses the crowd and things like that. This is more than just that, right? We're going to plot to kill someone. Just another glimpse of how it's wrong. I mean, how sincere this hatred was and this frustration that these Jews were feeling.
Not that we don't like Halo. I do that from everybody.
We've seen it time and again. What Paul actually goes through. It's easy for us to gloss over it. But he has been beaten so many times, been threatened so many times, And it's great, Jesus appears to him once in a while, which has got to be so reassuring, and I'm sure he draws upon that memory. But it really is a harrowing story that Luke is telling you, right? Of somebody, Paul, whose faith really compels him to do things that most of us would not do, to be honest. And again, they go to the chief priests and the elders with this plot to kill a guy who's under Roman guard at this point. So you kind of have a double-edged danger there. I mean, one, you're going to kill someone, but you're also going to kill someone who's under Roman protection. That's a little bit different. Those 40 people are putting themselves on the line. Their plan was not for this gigantic body of troops to be taking Paul to Caesarea. They were planning on 200 horsemen or whatever it was. But still, they're attacking someone under Roman guard. This isn't something that probably they thought they could just be real sneaky about and get away with. Nobody's going to know. But the high priests are in on this also. Again, one more little piece of the puzzle of what Jerusalem was like at this point. As I said, we have different factions going on. So the Sadducees and the Pharisees, we just talked about, Blake talked about last week, are still against each other over a number of issues, including the resurrection, whether or not there's resurrection. Well, we have on top of that Christian Jews. So we have Jews who don't believe in Christ, Sadducees and Pharisees. We have Jews who do believe in Christ. And so these three groups are all there. And of course, the Christian Jews, we obviously don't know any one of them particularly, but they have kind of ambivalent feelings towards Gentile believers. And what Paul's teaching the Gentile Christians about how Jewish they need to be. And so you have a lot of different factions here, all of whom can kind of take issue with Paul for some reason. And with each other. It's fascinating to just try to see the humanity of Paul in all of this. And the humanity of all these other people who I'd like to think we'd be the ones on Paul's side, that we would have been the ones screaming to free Jesus and not Barabbas, but we would have been. I would not have been, right? And so it's interesting to see what Paul goes through. N.T. Wright writes this: twice now the Tribune has rescued Paul from violence. Perhaps that's a sign. Perhaps the Roman system as a whole, despite its creaky bureaucracy and careless pagan attitude toward life, will now be the means by which he will be rescued from the threats that are reaching a crescendo. If that crossed his mind, it was vindicated the next day by another strange incident, for he tore a zealous Jew swore a solemn oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. And so it's just a really interesting idea here of how God can use anyone and everyone in any situation to further his kingdom. That's what N.T. Wright puts. It's like the Roman system of government, the bureaucracy. They're the same way that Jesus kind of got passed. I don't want him. You take him, man. You take him. You do this trial. I'm not going to put him to death. You put him to death. You get the Romans who are going to shuffle Paul around here, until he gets all the way to Rome. And you make the decision. You make the decision. You deal with this. It's bureaucracy. And it's everyone trying to make sure they are not the ones who are going to be accountable for a mistake that was made, especially a mistake against a Roman citizen. So a bunch of pagans operating in many ways counter to the way God's people are trying to live. And that's the system that's going to protect Paul from enemies and get him to where he wanted to go anyway, which was Rome. Of course, he wanted Rome to be a jumping off point to Spain. And so it's just really, another great glimpse of how God can work in the world. When Paul talks about going to Rome, he probably didn't have this in mind, that he was going to be arrested and escorted to Rome by Roman soldiers who were protecting him in doing so. Take your breaks where you get them. The economy is tough everywhere, right? It's like, next time you need to ride downtown, get yourself arrested, wherever you are. They'll drive you right down to the courthouse. I mentioned this, so the only mention of Paul's family. How close was he to these people? How many relatives did he have? What had his family's reaction been to when he goes from being this, superhero Pharisee persecuting Christians to the person who's taken that message to Gentiles? Not only did they convert to Christianity, quite a few Jews had converted to Christianity. He converted to Christianity and then took it out to the dirty old Gentiles. How did they react? We don't know. We just don't know. This is in Jerusalem. So yeah, his sister. He's from Tarsus. I don't know. He doesn't spend much time in Jerusalem at this point.
Pentecost though, that a lot of out-of-towners were.
Are they? Yeah, but we just don't know why they're there or how long they've been there. And this is the one, we think of Paul as being the greatest missionary ever. How did his own family react to it? Paul, he says he was a Pharisee of Pharisees, right? So you imagine his parents, his siblings. I mean, you're pretty proud of that, right? Maybe siblings might be a little jealous of the brothers, if you have any. But that's a big deal. He was a somebody. And then all of a sudden he becomes the enemy. We have no idea how they respond. We don't even know who we're talking about to respond. All we know of is a sister and a nephew at this point. Years after Damascus. Philippians, here's what he writes. Whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I've suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish in order that I may gain Christ. When I see things like this, and we think about that with Paul, and we realize this life on the road, he's been beaten numerous times, he's been wandering, at times aimlessly, before he gets the Macedonian call, he's walking through Turkey, not knowing where he's going. It's easy to see, the loss of just having a family life, a regular old, go home in the evening and, watch TV. He doesn't get any of that, but we don't think of, how about the loss of family? Even if they were close to him and they loved him, cared for him, even if they were believers, he didn't see him very much. So it's really interesting just to think these losses, how personal they could have been. But we don't know. We can only speculate. But loss of time with family, your loved ones.
We have this tendency to think of sin as being
Christians today.
outside of us. And when Jesus went to the cross,
Well, I don't think most people have Paul's heart.
the penalty for all this
No, I mean that everything's got a loss. Just
lying,
Oh.
cheating, or lust,
Yeah.
whatever it is, all these things.
Well, I don't think
Brothers and sisters, our sin was not
I don't think most of us think that way.
it's the core.
In theory, we do.
We are.
And I think when faced, we talk
We are sinners.
from pulpit quite often, right? We got a lot of very generous people in this church who dedicate a lot of time, a lot of money to people who need it. I mean, there are times where I think all of us, in our minds, thinking, man, I really have done nice things for people at times. I've suffered loss. I've lost time. I've lost energy. I've lost money to help other people. That's a good thing, but I think we're probably pretty proud of ourselves for doing that, somewhere in the back of our minds. And our loss it doesn't compare in any way I guess it's just one of those hard truths that
like it's something outside of us.
we make excuses for ourselves when
Where we
aren't suffering that kind of loss.
in our place. And
Like I said, yeah, they're taking this very, very seriously. The third hour of the night, most likely the middle of the night, they obviously they didn't keep time the same way we did. I didn't know this until I was reading a commentary about this. They basically thought you had daytime and nighttime. And there were either 10 or 12 hours in each. But they were well aware of the fact that during the course of a year, and you couldn't measure those hours very easily, because you don't have Timex devices. So, in the summertime, when daylight lasts longer, an hour would be longer than in the wintertime, when there's less daylight, because you'd be dividing it by either 12 or 10, depending on where you were in the world. So it's like an hour, but I mean, that's just, that wasn't a weird thing, that was just how it was.
I think the hour would be the same, there'd just be more of it.
No, it's same amount. So if you have 10 hours of daylight today, but you have 12 hours of daylight tomorrow, not tomorrow, 6 months from now, or whatever, you would still be dividing the period of time by 10.
And that,
It's based on a sundial. They don't change the sundial, the sun changes.
or, hourglass.
Flipping right out. It's completely trivial. It's just, I read that and I was fascinated. So in the middle of winter, an hour was less time than an hour in the summertime because you had more daylight. So you had
Well, you do with nighttime,
same thing.
it just flops.
Yeah.
Okay. Never heard that.
These backward savages. It's just really I'd never heard that. Maybe the commentary I was reading is lying, but either way. The one thing to remember, right, for today, they kept time very strangely. Luke stresses this several times. In fact, throughout Acts, definitely here, that Paul is blameless when it comes to Roman law. This seems to be very important for Luke to establish. Probably so that no one reading his works, Gospel or the Book of Acts, can level that against Paul. You know, he's not going to allow for that to be some kind of something that Paul has done wrong or anything like that. And then, the idea that this is a Jewish thing, it's the questions of their law. Why are they bothering us with this? And we've seen that numerous times before, in Corinth especially, where the Jews drag him before Gallo. And he says, if this were a matter of wrongdoing, I'd do something about it. He says, but it's a matter of your law. I don't care. You're all Jews, Gentiles, Jesus, whatever. I don't care. It's not Roman law. You're debating doctrinal religious issues, right? So they just don't care. So we've seen the same reaction to the Romans. Like, just gives us a glimpse into how they were. They really cared about what they cared about. Roman law. All right, we'll stop there. And you or Trent next week? Someone will say something next week. All right, thank you for your comments.
The whole thing. 20 years.
Yeah,